We have a lot of exciting sessions planned for you over the next few weeks. And today we are going to be talking about different types of gardens. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that we are part of University of Maryland Extension, which is part of the College of Natural Resources and part of the College Park campus. And because of that, we do receive federal funding at the college level, and that means that we want to be sure that we are offering our programs equally and accessibly to all individuals. So you will see the Injustice for All poster a couple different times throughout this presentation. And just a quick introduction. I know we only have 30 minutes, so we want to keep this short and sweet. But my name is Ashley Bodkins, and I am a home horticulture master gardener coordinator here in Garrett County. And I have my colleague, Sarah, who just turned on her video. I don't know if you want to unmute and talk or just, okay, so she's giving me the no. So Sarah Llewellyn is the Master Gardener Coordinator, Home Hort Educator, and Ag Educator for Allegheny County. So we are pleased to be here. She helped me put these slides together, but I am going to be doing a lot of the talking while she is in the meeting room, helping to take care of the folks that are here with us live at the Extension office. So just to wrap up, or to start off, what do we need to know about gardening and garden design? So the important thing to note is that you can put a garden in a lot of different locations, but in order for our vegetable gardens in particular to thrive, we do want to put them in an area that's going to get at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. So, that can kind of be hard. I get a lot of questions about, well, what if it gets less sun? Well, less than 6 to 8 hours just means that your plants are not going to ever produce the max capacity, right? So again, when we think about gardening, we want to put the right plants in the right place. That ensures that they are happy, that they're going to thrive, and happy plants make happy gardeners. So that's things to think about. Some other considerations when we think about placing your garden is the ease of water. So we know that if you have to carry water more than necessary, or if it's a struggle, that it's going to negatively impact your garden, because there's going to be days where you're tired. There's going to be days where the sun is, drying it out maybe faster in some locations than you can even get it watered. So, think about how close you are to a water source. And then there are some other, considerations about wildlife. Despite what you may believe, there are a lot of critters. There's a lot of squirrels. There's a lot of chipmunks, moles and voles, as well as deer, groundhogs, raccoons, all the things that can get into your garden. So having a plan, whether that's, maybe a dog that can help keep some of those critters out, or maybe that's a fence. It's going to look a little different for every location, but I often say, if you plant it, they will come. So we have to just keep that in mind. And then the very last thing I want you to think about is that every system is going to have its limitations. And there's only a certain amount that these plants can accomplish based on what those limitations are. So we're going to go through specific examples here in a few minutes to talk about some of those limitations for each example. And then the last thing is that all gardens are work. So just you need to keep that in mind, that whenever, there's no easy way to garden, I guess. Everything has its challenges. So different, most common types of vegetable garden systems are going to be everything from a raised bed to containers to an in-ground or traditional method. So again, every system is going to have its strengths and weaknesses. You need to think about your particular situation when we're planning out a garden. Do you have physical limitations or restrictions? Then maybe you do want to consider containers or a raised bed where you can get it really up higher so that it's not such a stressor. Does your site have physical limitations? So is it wet? Is it too sunny or too shady? Does it get, particularly wet whenever there's rainfall? Does it lay wet throughout the year? These are different limitations, again, that you want to think about when you are installing a garden. And again, I just put this down here at the bottom, that every type of garden, it does have those limitations. And it's all going to require a certain amount of work and dedication throughout the entire season. And at the end of the day, maybe it's a mixture of what you want to have. Maybe you want to have a small traditional in-ground garden and then some additional raised beds or some additional containers on your deck to supplement what it is that you want to eat. And so here's just a couple of lists for you to think about as, if you're going to consider in-ground or either raised bed or container gardening. So we're going to start with the in-ground. There's usually less initial costs, minus, how you're going to get it tilled. And we're going to talk about some of those no-till options here in a few minutes. Other pros for in-ground gardening include that you're going to have more opportunity because you're going to have a larger planting area. And then there's more potential for deep root systems to really root in there, which can be helpful if we do have things like droughts or other stressors throughout the growing season. The main cons with in-ground gardening is that tilling is always a challenge. If you don't have the physical strength to do it by hand with a shovel or a hoe, what kind of a mechanical tiller do you need? And there comes an expense with that. And then, of course, the upkeep so that it's going to work year after year. There's always going to be weed challenges if you're growing in native natural soils. And, in the in-ground garden systems, you're going to be required to get down lower and a lot more bending and kneeling. So what are some pros and cons to a raised bed or a container? You're going to have much better soil because you're often going to be using what we call a soilless growing mixture, which we're going to talk about next. Your upfront costs can be more, though, if you have to purchase materials to build a raised bed or containers to plant into. Just the soil volume in general can be a lot to invest in. And once we take anything and make it more three-dimensional, whether that's with a container or with a raised bed, that is going to mean that you're going to have improved drainage, but sometimes that can almost be a negative. And they almost dry out a little too quickly, especially once roots are established and the plants start to get larger. So just be forewarned that with these types of systems, you are going to need a really good plan for watering. So I just mentioned this word, soilless growing media. So what is that? Well, that is what you go to the store and you purchase. Usually as potting soil, if you go to a big box store or even a greenhouse setting, this is what's going to be used in containers whenever you purchase any type of plant that's been growing. It's usually mixed of three things, with the main ingredient being peat moss, although now due to limitations on peat moss and peat bogs, they are trying to switch commercial blends to more things that contain things like coconut coir. But peat moss or something that is going to replace that, perlite, and then vermiculite. Those are going to be the main three items that are found in these soilless growing media. There's some things to notice about this is that these mixtures do not all occur anywhere in the world in this form. So it's all different parts that come together to make a whole system. And the advantages are that it is, sterile, so there's no pests, there's no pathogens. It's going to be weed free, and it's going to have this perfect blend for this optimum water drainage and retention. So what could go wrong with that, right? We may be wondering, but most of you can probably figure it out. The main disadvantage is that it's expensive. So if you're going to do this on a large scale, it can require a lot of finances to do that. It can be bulky and hard to handle. And again, it's designed to be placed inside of containers or, maybe a larger raised bed, potentially, but it's not designed to be a soil amendment. So we don't recommend that you purchase this product and just dump it out into your garden. That's not what it's designed for. So what can we do if we are looking for those alternatives to in-ground gardens that don't require a tiller? So this information is taken from a blog that I wrote for the Maryland Grows blog a couple years ago, and it was all about no-till gardening. So alternatives that require, and I have 100% no-till on here. That would be 100% no-till for the first year. After that, if anything in the native outdoors is going to eventually grow weeds. But growing in containers, again, is a great opportunity for no-tilling. Again, raised beds that first year you fill it won't require tilling, but then after that it will. And then there's this way of starting a garden that's called sheet layering or lasagna gardening. So with it, you will need to plan ahead. This isn't necessarily something you can do, 2 days before you want to start a garden. But it's basically just the concept of some layer to smother whatever is there. So usually sod or grass. We use cardboard a lot of times or several layers of newspaper. And then on top of this, you would then layer different types of organic material. So whether that's compost, if you want to plant right away, topsoil, maybe even some of that soilless growing media the first year, and then you would just plant directly into that. So this is a really nice way for people, again, to start a garden, a small garden potentially on a budget without any tilling. You can do this for native plants. You can do this for vegetable gardening. There's really not a whole lot of limitations to it. The largest limitation is that you need to plan ahead because the longer you have for this system to start breaking down naturally, the more optimum it's going to be to grow your vegetables and plants. Again, if we have time, we're going to go through this blog, but I just wanted to reference that quickly. Some other information in there talks about the importance of soil. So again, nobody ever wants to talk about soil health. It's not something that makes people go, yippee, let's talk about soils. But it is very important. And we have to remember that soil is this living, complex, natural covering over the earth. So not only do we need it to help us grow plants, but it also helps to absorb water and nutrients, pollutants, and it also helps to store a lot of carbon. So, knowing all these things about soil and how we can manage it can really in turn help us as gardeners. So the top portion is the usable portion that we use. Usually it's maybe 6 to 7 inches. Maybe it's only 3 or 4 inches where you are. It just depends. But again, knowing that it's living, we want to have lots of good critters in there, whether that's micro or macro organisms. So just things to think about to make your soils healthy. And when we talk about soil health and soil science, we talk about this ideal soil. So this would be ideal for agriculture production. And there's not a lot of these that exist naturally around the world. But the ideal soil is 50% solid. So that would be your sand, silt, and clay, 5% organic matter. So anything that was once alive, like humus or compost, and then what people don't understand is that you really need a lot of this pore space. So whether that's space from where roots have died or where it's, earthworm channels, but it's this space so that your soil isn't completely compacted. And it used to, when we were growing up, we were always told you don't go in the vegetable garden when it's been wet, right? So if it's rained or if there's a heavy dew, you don't want to walk through that garden because that helps to squish out all of that pore space. It smushes the air out, and it can help squish the water out from the weight of walking or even like equipment in there too. And then the other really important part of soil health is the pH. So if you don't know anything else about your soil, you should figure out a way to determine the soil pH. So the pH scale is 0 to 14, with 0 being acidic and 14 being the base. So we want our soils for most garden vegetables to be somewhere between 6 and 7. Um, Again, depending on what type of plant you're growing, that may change. There are some plants that really like acidic soils. So blueberries and rhododendrons, they really like acidic soils. So down here below 7, closer to like 4 to 5 is where they're going to thrive. And all of that becomes really important when we look at this next chart, which is your soil pH and your plant nutrients. So the top three nutrients on here are the macronutrients that plants need in the largest amount in order to grow, in addition to carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And you can see that whenever our pH down here at the bottom is our pH scale, whenever it's between 6 and 7, that's when the largest amount of these nutrients are most available to our plants. So that's kind of what guides us. So if your pH is down here at 4 or 5, and you're going to have to put on triple the amount of nitrogen in order for our plants to take it up. And we do have concerns with environmental issues and water quality if there's too much phosphorus and nitrogen in our soils. Again, we're going kind of quick through a lot of this just to kind of give you some information and some resources. So again, some soil amendments. This is a fact sheet that comes right off of the University of Maryland Extension website. If you're looking to add organic matter, how can we do that? And organic matter is what stores a lot of these nutrients that then become broken down by soil microbes and then be released into our plants. So you can do that through composting. You can do that through the addition of things like composted cow manure or chicken litter. But again, that can become a little bit of a concern from a human health perspective and food safety. So if we are using animal waste, particularly cow or chicken or rabbit, we want to be sure that we're not applying that near the time that we're going to be planting our vegetables. So usually fall or 4 to 6 months prior to harvesting is a really ideal time to do that. And it gives your soil microbes time to break it down and make it available to your plants. Okay, and then if you are interested in doing a soil sample, that is the only way to really tell you exactly what is in your soil. The only other way to do that would be to just guess, and that's not very good. So this is information. There are soil testing laboratories that you can send it to. It costs anywhere between, $11 to $30, plus your mailing costs. And again, you're supposed to do this every 3 years. And the best guidance is that you take 10 random samples throughout your garden area, mix that together in a plastic container, and then take a 1 cup sample that you would then submit to the lab. So if anybody wants more information, we can discuss that. And then just a quick note about containers. All containers need to have drainage holes. It can be anything as simple as a cardboard box, anything that's going to hold soil for a short amount of growing season. So here in Garrett County, we have about 130 days, 140 days of growing season between the frosts, between spring frost and fall frost. So, you can do some really short crops like lettuce in just a short cardboard box and then compost the whole thing at the end of the season. And then these grow bags are becoming really popular because they're very, very affordable. They can get them, through online sources for less than $1 a piece if you buy bulk. And at the end of the season, you just dump out all of the soil and you can save those bags and use them season after season. And then just a little bit about choosing your vegetables. We're going to talk a lot about seed starting on the 28th at our next session of Dig In, but knowing what your growing zone is, knowing your space constraints. Again, if you have a small space, you probably don't want to plant pumpkins unless you're really planning to, preserve a lot of pumpkins to use and eat later on. The whole purpose of this Dig In series is to get more people growing more of their own food. And this is a great blog on Maryland Grows that was just published last week, and it's how many plants to put into your garden. So if you have questions about that, there's lots of different theories. Plant them thicker and you're going to have less weed competition, but maybe your vegetables aren't going to grow as large. So that's something to think about. And then budget and planning. Whenever we think about budgeting, it's always a good idea to start small. Anytime you start any new adventure, whether that's gardening or crafting or whatever it may be, start small so that you can have success. Once you build success year after year, then you can add different crops or add to your garden to make it a little bit larger. That gives you a lot of incentive and it gives you a lot of really positive inspiration once you have success. If you can share tools between family members or different friends, that's a good idea too. Grow what you want to eat. That's the best advice I think we could ever give you is, find a crop that you really, really like to grow or you really, really like to eat and see if you can learn how to grow that. And that's another reason and way that Extension can help you figure that out. And now we are going to transition to a quick demonstration to go along with this line of soil is going to be a demonstration on soil blocking. So we're going to transition to the live webcam here in just a second. So for those of you online, just sit tight.
Okay. All right.
And
So
I think it should be coming up there, but I'm not seeing it.
should be. Maybe Roberta can let us know in the chat if it's working. So
Yeah, oh, it's over there. So you guys can see in person.
The microphone is off on her.
Yeah, that's over where she was. It's on here now, so they should be able to hear us just fine. You can turn up my volume a touch if you want to make sure you can hear it up on the top left.
oh, I think it'll make it go.
Okay, just to make sure. All right, so soil blocking is one of my new favorite things. I've started all kinds of things with it. You can go from flowers to vegetables. Just be mindful of what size soil blocker you want. Like this would work great. I use this one for like snapdragons. I've even done some different greens in this one. I want to space it out better if I'm using a container. The trickiest part is getting your medium correct. They always need a binder. It needs something that really sticks it together. You could use like a peat moss that does a pretty good job. The other thing that I absolutely love and I think does even better with this is coconut core. I've even seen this for sale at like Dollar Tree. Like you can get the little tiny bricks and you'd be surprised how much they absorb and really get a little bit larger. So this does a really good job. I think if I had to pick, I would choose this over the peat moss. The peat moss is a nice amendment, but this definitely does a lot better of a job. You could also add things like compost that helps out because you know you want a little bit of something in there to give it food. And you want it to, when you mix it up, you want it to be nice and wet, but just like wet enough that when you squeeze it, it doesn't do that. But when you squeeze it, it's gonna make like a nice little ball. If getting dirty makes you squeamish, then wear some gloves. It doesn't do anything for me, so I'm fine. I've learned that what makes me the most successful when I do this is when I put it into the soil, like I really push it down well. I got this at a school, they were getting rid of them. So, you know, if you luck out and find the right school getting rid of things. And then I always turn it over because there'll always be some blocks that aren't quite right, that they're not full enough. So I'll just kind of squeeze it down in there. It could be the perfectionist in me. I like them to all look uniform. And then I'm just gonna, is it okay if I put it in this one so they can see it? And you just put it down, squeeze the handle up, and then you can see you have your nice little blocks. I like to always put it on something that I don't need to move them for a while because they are going to be fragile until the root structure takes hold. One of the things that I did with this, because I have a really hard time growing sunflowers. I love growing sunflowers, but the birds will eat them, the rodents will eat them, the deer will eat the shoots. I mean, I've had everything. So I started some in the larger blocks and then transplanted them out. And I was shocked with how long their roots were. The one I picked up and held here and the root went all the way down past my elbow. So it transplanted very well. They do something called air prune. They really keep the roots in these little squares. Let's see if I can pick one up. So they do a good job of keeping their roots within there. And they even make blockers that this little one fits down into the next size block. So you can just up block it by just putting it down in the next one because the hole is the size of the block. The only down part of this are they are fragile and getting your mix right is tricky, but I found that the secret ingredient is the coconut core because it has the nice long fibers in it and getting your moisture right. These can be a little pricey. There's a lot of places online to purchase them. I asked for these for Christmas because my family says I'm hard to buy for. So that's how I got mine because I think they're wonderful. And you can even buy a set where it has different sizes so you can upsize them.
Okay, so you want to talk about the quick benefits of soil blocking?
So my benefits are I don't have to have a bunch of plastic containers that are going to break down. If you've ever tried to use them from year to year and they get that plasticky, like fragile, and they kind of become shards, so you can avoid that. I do feel like they do a good job with the roots. It makes your roots a lot healthier. When you're transplanting these, you don't have to try to pop them out. They never get root bound. The roots are never going to grow in a circle. So I feel like half the time when I'm popping them out of those commercial trays, like I'm trying to pull the roots down so that, like, you know, they're not container bound. So they do a good job of not being container bound. That's really good. And the soil health, like it's keeping it very healthy. So all in all, I think that these do a wonderful job. Just keep in mind the size seed is going to be dependent on which one of these you want to use. Yep. All right. Are we finished? And I will let you place that here the best you can. I mean, I can try. If I make Ashley's thing with it and dirty. There we go. Let me just, she's gonna love me for this.
All right. So I think that concludes this first episode of Dig In. So thank you all for joining us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat and we can try to grab them. But we are going to stop the recording.